when you get into studying genetic effects in offspring, these are very long-term experiments. And it's really only been since World War II that there has been a really concerted effort to study human populations exposed to relatively low doses of radiation over a long period of time.
Is there any danger of deleterious genetic effects from perhaps our regular visits to the dentist if we have x-rays taken, or regular visits to the doctor and have x-rays taken?
Well, I think not, because the medical profession is very concerned that the germ tissue, the reproductive organs, not receive any more radiation than is absolutely necessary. And so there are precautions taken to prevent this. And the amount of radiation that you get in such an examination is very, very small. It's a fraction of a Röntgen unit, which is a very small amount of radiation. The American Dental Association has last year, or year before last, cautioned its members not to use dental x-rays as a routine procedure for this very reason, that they wanted to cut down on the amount of radiation that people get.
Has been completely gutted by fire. Firemen received the call at about 6:30 this morning, and start any time. This Gary, this fire still yet under control, but we see the white smoke, and perhaps it will be shortly. This is Gary Gunner reporting from the scene at Amarillo High School, Amarillo, Texas.
To get data on the human being is exceedingly difficult, as you can imagine. We can't experiment with the human, for one thing. Now, most of our estimates are based on laboratory experiments with animals, for example, mice. It's a bit difficult to extrapolate from mouse to man, but this is the best that we can do. There are a few human populations in the world who have received fairly large doses of radiation. One, of course, being the Japanese, who were exposed to the atomic bombs during World War II. There are two other populations, one in South America, where they live on sands that have a very high background radiation. Another group is in India, in Kerala, where there are very high background levels. But only recently have we been able to begin studies on these people to see whether or not there is some deleterious effect to them for them living in those
immediate
high backgrounds.
Physical effects or genetic?
Genetic effects from the standpoint, say, for the induction of tumors, and genetic effects from the standpoint of what effects that are produced on the offspring of these people.
What do you think the recent segregation rulings and the HEW stands are going to have an effect in regards to segregation in Texas? What kind of problems are we going to be coping with statewide?
Well, I think we've made a
great deal of progress here in Texas. As a matter of fact, I think of all the southern or southwestern states, we can take pride in the progress that we've made as far as integration in our public schools. Certainly, the HEW regulations have gone too far recently. President Nixon, I feel, has broken some of his campaign promises, and it's becoming more and more difficult each day to determine which side of these issues that President Nixon is on or that this administration's on. They seem to be vacillating a great deal. But I think we are doing a good job at the local level with our local school boards in our local communities bringing about integration. And I want to continue this. We must have equality in our public schools in Texas. We must have an opportunity for all Texans to have quality education. And I support our local school boards and their tremendous progress that we've made.
In regards to another youth problem, I believe you and Governor Smith have recently come out with a drug abuse program or anti-drug abuse program. What do you hope to do with this?
One of the major problems in Texas in the 70s is the use of drugs and narcotics by particularly our young people. We need an education program in Texas, and I think we've failed as parents, as citizens, and as public officials in providing proper education. And not education in junior colleges and senior colleges, not education in the high schools. We need to provide education about drugs and their harms and their effects to young people in junior high and grade school when they are in the very formative years of their lives, when they're going to have their first exposure for an opportunity to use drugs.
No, sir. That's one of the surprises of my life. As much as the white man has exploited the African, and sometimes in a violent way, there is no anti-white feeling in Africa.
One of the surprises you received over there, perhaps, was the feeling toward the Middle East war.
Well, now that was another surprise of my life. To my great surprise, Black Africa is decidedly and emphatically pro-Israel. Very much so.
You didn't expect that?
No, I didn't.
What about their interest in America, Dr. Christmas?
Well, let me give you an illustration. One of the missionaries brought to me a newspaper, a daily newspaper, a big one. And he said, I want you to look at this newspaper, count the articles that are on the front page. And I counted about 10. Then he said, now count the articles that are on America. And I counted 7 of them.
Then is there communist penetration in the country?
Deeply so, especially from Red China. As you know, Red China is building the railroad through Tanzania and Zambia. And that means they're shipping into the country hundreds and hundreds of workers, and every one of them is a propagandist for Red China. They are economically penetrating the country, selling their goods there, and of course they're sewing it down with literature.
This document is a proclamation signed by the mayor of the city of Fort Worth, Shockey Stovall, proclaiming the month of March as Police Appreciation Month. Mr. Berkowitz, how did this come about?
We felt after we had our police ride-in this Christmas time that we weren't aware of the problems that the policemen in the city of Fort Worth have. We felt that we of Elif Shamblin Lodge of B'nai B'rith, it would be our civic duty to try to inform the everyday household civilian personnel what the problems are of the police department and how we can help them.
Just how are you going about that?
We are trying to get together in homes in different parts of the city of Fort Worth with men and women of the area, bringing in the policeman from the beat, a representative from the police department, and sitting down and talking to them and letting the people in the area find out that a policeman is a human being and a person just like we are.
Hopes appear to be dimming for a new Fort Worth library, at least for the moment. The City Council seems to be willing to let the matter take its own painfully slow course with a series of civic meetings and other public opinion-getting gimmicks. Councilman recently invited 3 out-of-town librarians at a cost of $2,500 to visit Fort Worth and to present their expert opinion on the best location for the proposed new library. The men came, and after a helicopter ride and some hours of meditation at the Fort Worth Press Club, the out-of-town committee recommended a downtown site for the new book repository. There were no surveys taken, just an expert librarian's opinion rendered by the 3 visitors from out of town. The city paid the $2,500 fee for the survey, or for the opinion, because, as one councilman put it, we pay our debts here in Texas. This same Fort Worth City councilman told Channel 8 News that the opinions of out-of-town visitors, or experts, as the case turned out to be, may be somewhat less today than they were a few weeks ago. Although the opinion may prove to be of little value, the city was morally obligated to pay the fee, according to the same councilman. Then there's the question of what becomes of the old library property. Some uses currently being discussed informally by councilmen, a site for the cramped county house corporation courts, and maybe even the site of a new and expanded city jail. All of these items at this point just the product of informal discussion. The much-needed new library, at this time, mañana, tomorrow. This is Art Sinclair reporting for Channel 8 News.
This program seems to be a program that will be more or less meeting some of the economic and the social needs. It will more or less cause a use of the school building year-round. It will cause the youngster to have more of an individual type of learning.
What is the outcome of the program? What will happen?
Well, the outcome of the program could be that eventually all of the schools in Dallas would be on a year-round program, or a year-round school program.
Has it worked anywhere else?
Yes, it has worked in other places, in not only high schools but in colleges, and then it has failed in some places also. It appears that if the people want this type of program, well, then the program will go.
Mm-hmm. What are the advantages? What are the basic advantages to the students with this program?
Well, there are many advantages. One of the advantages we mentioned a minute ago, it will give more of an individual type of learning. It will spread our manpower out in such a way that the youngsters will be able to be on the market the year round rather than just being thrown on the market during the school year, during the summer.
We heard this real loud wind and rain. We couldn't see anything else but hear the wind, and then all of a sudden there was a big crashing sound, and this old barn that was next door all fell on top of our house, and it didn't sound like anything had fallen on our house, but that's what it was. When we looked outside, it was all over the top of the roof and front yard, backyard. Our cars are damaged and everything.
Do you think it was a tornado?
It must have been. It sounded like a train roaring through. It couldn't have been anything else.
I can't think of anything else that would have done this much damage and pick up that big building and land it on top of our house. I don't think anything else could do that.
Probably only school integration and school busing have polarized more parents than fluoridation. When Dallas started putting fluoride in its water nearly 4 years ago, it caused quite a splash here in town, with opponents saying it was forced medication and proponents claiming clear medical advantages. Surprisingly, today the issue still has not been settled for sure. Officials do not know to this day whether fluoridation does any good. In order to know for sure, a survey was needed at the time fluoride was first added, and no such survey has been taken. But, according to City Dental Health Director Dr. Lloyd Richards, such a survey would still do some good.
The problem is that if we are to show the, let's say, the percent of reduction in tooth decay in children, then we would have to have a baseline to determine the number of decayed teeth per child.
Is there any benefit from having this statistical information since there is all the other information available?
Yes, I think so, because most every community wants to know the benefits that their own children are receiving, and this is what this would show in Dallas if we did a survey of this type.
Although Dallas has no statistical proof that fluoridation helps teeth, some dentists are apparently convinced. Such a man is Dr. Stuart Wallace, who during his practice in Dallas has seen a definite improvement.
The 3- and 4-year-old child that we see now has a very minor decay problem, if any. And more than likely, most of the percentage of them, there's just no decay problem at all.
Can you lay most of this improvement to fluoride?
I really can't put it anyplace else, with possibly the exception that we dentists are now more accepting our responsibility as educating our own public, or trying to raise the dental IQ of the public.
But despite what seems to be a mass of information in favor of fluoridation, it's not a drop in the bucket when faced with the political question of compulsory medication. Nationally known commentator Dan Smoot explains his position on the matter.
I do not think that government at any level has the right to force medication upon people against their will. And that is precisely what they're doing in fluoridation. They force the total population to consume fluoridated water under the presumption that consuming fluoridated water will help a tiny minority of the citizens, namely children under 10 years old. No responsible medical person whose statements that I have read even alleges that drinking fluoridated water will help adults or anybody over about 10 years old.
Fluoridation of drinking water began almost exactly 25 years ago in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and has since flooded the country. Now there are only some 10,000 dry communities, that is, towns that don't put fluoride in their drinking water. Yet the debate goes on, and it may never be settled. This is Phil Reynolds, Channel 8 News.
Well, there are 100 million people against 2 million Israelis. Eventually, it seems to me, the Arabs will be able to mount an attack that will push Israel into the sea. At the present moment, the combined Arab air forces have 850 planes against Israel's 155. The only thing that's kept Israel alive is that the Israeli people, the Jewish people, have been extremely brave and very united and highly skilled in their self-defense, and the Arab leaders have been unable to generate the same kind of patriotism among their people, largely because they don't take care of their people and let them live in misery. But one day they could possibly have a young group of Arabs like these guerrillas who are rising now who will fight better. And Israel has no guarantee that she will survive unless great powers guarantee her existence.
By great powers, you mean the United States?
Well, yes, we are the principal power upon whom the Israelis can depend, but also in a negative way, I mean the Soviet Union. If the Soviet Union would stop supplying arms and encouragement to NASA for his mad designs, then NASA would have to stop. And we are going to have to persuade the Soviet Union to stop fomenting war in the Middle East. But we're not in a good position to do that until we stop fomenting war ourselves in Southeast Asia. Until America gets out of Vietnam, it's very difficult for us to treat in a rational way with such a problem as the Middle East.
Basically, these ideas are very simple, and that is that business is a technique, is a body of knowledge, if you will, that can be learned by other people, and that further it can be taught by successful business people. You don't need a degree in teaching in order to be able to teach business. That you can teach practical, down-to-earth business solutions right on the job, right at the man's place of business, and that's really what we're all about. We're a consulting organization.
In other words, you will help black people that are already in businesses or minorities who are already in business, but you're not trying to get new ones into
our doors
business
are
world.
open to everybody who is in business or wants to get in business. Our organization is not yet in being in the sense of having an office and a staff in Dallas, so that we're not ready to receive anyone yet. But when we are, and when that's announced, the idea will be for those who desire a business career of business ownership, or who are in business and who think they need help in one way or another, to come to meet the interviewer, to discuss their problems, and to be assigned an individual consultant.
We hope to initiate in Dallas, Dr. Conrad and myself are particularly interested in this, a program whereby children in the junior high and the high school would be exposed to minority group physicians, be brought to the campus to see operations, and in other ways be stimulated to consider a career in medicine, and that they would then begin to prepare for their college work and hopefully be attracted to this, what I think is a very exciting profession.
Certainly. So by this program, you hope to accomplish, in other words, to eliminate the shortage, motivate minority youngsters in this area at an early age.
Yes. When we can only take about 1 out of every 12 applicants to our medical school. You can only take well-prepared students, because we don't want to turn out physicians who are not well-prepared. And what we hope is that by stimulating them to study early in life and to prepare hard in college, that we'll have, instead of 13 applications, 100 applications or 200 applications.
All we're doing is trying to run down to the students some of the things that are wrong with this institution, and let them see for themselves the things that are going on, you see. Because, here lately there hasn't been much communication, and we think the students need to know about the things that are going on.
What sort of support do you have from the student body as a whole?
I think we have the majority of the black, I'm sure we have the majority of the black students, and I couldn't say exactly what percentage of the white students, but quite a few of them.
where ethnic problems are involved, they felt I was not getting a total picture. And I probably agree with this, and I intend to set up an ethnic advisory council. The other specific item for future action was that they requested that in this communication problem, which is always not hearing all segments in this case, I said I would be happy to talk with the group that they feel is not being represented, primarily themselves. And I agreed to do this by going down into one of the lounge areas and rapping with these students on some kind of a recurring basis, once every 2 weeks or something like this.
Offices for the District Corps of Engineers located here in Fort Worth are in the Fritz G. Lanham Federal Building. Soon, the office space may have to be expanded. A major personnel increase for the Fort Worth District Corps of Engineers office appears now to be almost certain. As reported on Channel 8 News last week, it now appears almost a certain fact that 220 to 230 civilian employees of the Albuquerque Corps of Engineers office may soon be transferred to Fort Worth. The Albuquerque, New Mexico District Office is currently in charge of construction at several Texas military bases, including Abilene, Big Spring, El Paso, and Wichita Falls. The Corps of Engineers transfers are expected to come in a major Defense Department announcement March the 12th. However, Channel 8's Washington informants told us today by telephone that the announcement may come as early as this Friday. The Defense Department bombshell is reported to contain the largest package of military base closings in the history of America. Channel 8 News has learned also that the announcement may contain one or more Texas Air Force bases. From Fort Worth at the Federal Building, this is Art Sinclair reporting for Channel 8 News.
They may try, but I don't think they'll ever get the real thing because it's about 20% protein and it's very nutritious. Therefore, I don't think they can substitute it.
had trouble getting into business because he doesn't have any risk capital. He goes to the bank with a plan, but the bankers refuse. Because he has no collateral. What can you do for this person?
Well, this is the individual.